Well, hello there. We're back. Welcome to episode 14 of the War, Sports, Politics, and Dragons podcast. I am Dave the Nerd Emperor, and as always, I will be your host today. Thank you so much for tuning in. It means a lot to have you listen. We're growing. Please help us spread the word. Help me increase my numbers to qualify for a sponsor. We're now on not just Spotify, where we got our start. We're also on Amazon, Audible, and iHeartRadio. Others are coming soon as well. We're on Twitter at the WSPD Podcast. We're on YouTube at the WSPD Podcast. We're on Instagram at the WSPD Pod. Patreon.com/WSP Dragons, and that is a work in progress. I have an update on that as well. If you want to help us improve our tech, you can donate through Cash App to WSPD Pod or Venmo, the WSPD Pod. Follow, share, and support, please. But again, enough of that. Let's get on with the show. Starting with war, since that's the first, noun in the title of the podcast. Let's take a look at an interesting piece of information there. Fighter from Lincoln shoots down Iranian drone. Excuse me. And of course, as I start looking, I can't find the bookmark where I found this, so give me just a second. This is what happens when you have too many apps on your phone that are internet browsers, and you tend to use more than one. So, and that's not a good idea. I'll just say that much. Okay, so here we go. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about one thing, and then that'll bring us back into the discussion about the drone, because it's part of a broader picture here involving the so-called Islamic Republic, which is really an Islamo-fascist dictatorship of Iran. World News report from the Associated Press: Iran's president seeks fair and equitable negotiations while U.S. shoots down drone. This is from John Gambrell. Dateline Dubai. Iran's president said Tuesday he instructed the country's foreign minister to pursue fair and equitable negotiations, quote unquote, with the United States. The first clear sign from Tehran it wants to try to negotiate as tensions remain high with Washington after the Mideast country's bloody crackdown on nationwide protests last month and the month before. Okay, and the month before, and the month before, and the month before, all the way back to the autumn of 1979, when the Ayatollah Khomeini and his thugs overthrew Shah Pahlavi's government. Okay, let's not forget, these people have been brutal tyrants for quite some time, and to say that they just now cracked down on protesters is a crock of shit, okay? They're trying to, underplay it a little bit, but whatever. The announcement came as a U.S. Navy fighter jet shot down an Iranian drone that approached an American aircraft carrier early Tuesday morning. Iranian fast boats from its paramilitary Revolutionary Guard and what do you think of when you think of fast boats from a paramilitary Revolutionary Guard? I think of a bunch of idiots toting AK-47s. I'm going to blow my nose real quick here. So, when I think of paramilitary and fast boats, I think of a bunch of idiots with AK-47s and glorified bass boats coming after a multi-billion-dollar United States warship. So, okay, Mouse, go ahead. Let's watch you kick that elephant's ass. Good luck. And by the way, that elephant, the USS Abraham Lincoln, ain't afraid of those mice. Anyway, Iranian fast boats from its paramilitary Revolutionary Guard also tried to stop a U.S. flagged ship in the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow mouth of the Persian Gulf. Persian Gulf empties into, the Arabian Sea, which becomes the Indian Ocean, I think. Iran did not immediately acknowledge either incident. The incident strained, but apparently did not totally derail hopes for talks between Iran and the U.S. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has been planning to hold talks with Iranian officials later this week, and they're going to do that in Turkey, which along the eastern border and the northwestern border of Iran, they share a border there. President Donald Trump, quote, is always wanting to pursue diplomacy first, but obviously it takes two to tango, unquote, Levitt said. Quote, you need a willing partner to achieve diplomacy, and that's something that Special Envoy Witkoff is intent on exploring and discussing. The shift toward negotiation marks a major turn for reformist President Masoud Pezeshkian. Okay. Now, his last name is spelled Pezeshkian. One thing I have learned about the etymology of surnames is that this isn't always true, but if your last name ends in IAN, then it tends to imply that your family is Armenian in origin. So Armenia is in the Caucasus, and I think it borders Iran. So just making an observation and, just saying that may be where his family hails from originally. Anyway, he had broadly warned Iranians for weeks that the turmoil in his country had gone beyond his control. It also signals that the president received support from Iran's supreme leader, so the guy who's actually in charge, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, also known as ass hairs, for talks that the 86-year-old cleric previously had dismissed. Turkey has been working behind the scenes to make the talks happen there later this week as Witkoff's traveling in the region. A Turkish official later said the location of talks was uncertain, but that Turkey was ready to support the process. There's a little more to the story, but we're going to go back to the drone shoot down real quick since that's where we led. And this, of course, from AP as well, from Konstantin Toropin and Farnoosh Amiri. U.S. shoots down Iranian drone that, quote, aggressively approached an aircraft carrier, military says. Okay, Dateline Washington, a U.S. Navy fighter jet shot down an Iranian drone that was approaching the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln. Now, the Abe is one of our newer CVNs, which is a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. In the Arabian Sea, U.S. CENTCOM, Central Command, said Tuesday, threatening to ramp up tensions as the Trump administration warns of possible military action to get Iran to the negotiating table. Top of my head, I'm drawing a blank on... Oh, wait a minute. I think I know. Hold on. I had a pop-up appear there because I ain't paying to read AP. Anyway, hold on. I lost my spot. But it was shot down by one of our F-35s. I can tell you that. And here it is. Here's confirmation. The Shahed 139 drone was shot down by an F-35C fighter jet from the Lincoln, which was sailing about 500 miles, 800 kilometers from Iran's southern coast. Why would an Iranian drone be that far out? Wonder why. No American troops were harmed and no U.S. equipment was damaged, the military statement noted. Iranian state media reported that Iran's paramilitary... I'm not going to use that term paramilitary anymore. What that means is it's a bunch of goons who support the Islamo-fascist regime, but they don't really have official military training. They basically go to some sort of quasi-terrorist boot camp, and they get some rudimentary knowledge about a few things. But it's not like they're excessively schooled in strategy and tactics and logistics and intel and so on and so forth. They're basically just thugs with Kalashnikovs, by and large. Okay, the Republican Guard was the Republican Guard was actually they were the better troops that the Iraqis had, and we went through them like shit through a goose. So I'm not worried about any confrontation that we would have with Iran. I just don't want us to have one. Okay, I'll go on record right now saying that. Yes, we would absolutely mop the floor with anything Iran sends after us, but I don't want us to go into that for a variety of political, social, and economic reasons, because we just don't need to have yet another fight going on in the Middle East with another backwards-ass country. Of course, Iran's not a backwards country. The people running it are backwards. So another backwardly run country that we could make into an ally instead, I just don't know how we're going to do that with the current people running it. And that's the rub for all of this. But Iranian state media reports that the Revolutionary Guard is investigating what they refer to as the interruption of the drone. Semi-official Tasnim news agency posted on its Telegram account that before the footage cut out, the drone was able to successfully transfer the images it took back to Iran. Okay, well, so it was out on a photo reconnaissance mission. U.S. says Iran also harassed a merchant vessel. After the shootdown, Revolutionary Guard forces harassed the merchant vessel Stena Imperative, which is ML Stena Imperative, as in merchant liner Stena Imperative. 2 boats and an Iranian Mahajir drone approached the ship at high speeds and threatened to board and seize the tanker. The destroyer USS McFall, which is, I believe, a DDG, a guided missile destroyer, responded and escorted the Stena Imperative with defensive air support from the U.S. Air Force. So that means that probably stuff we had based in maybe Kuwait, maybe Saudi Arabia, maybe in the UAE, came in and, said hi. Adding that the merchant's vessel is now sailing safely. Talks between Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, sorry, got it wrong either way, and Iranian officials are still planned, White House and Iranian officials said. So things are still a little uneasy in the Mideast. I hope that it doesn't ripple over into fuel prices. We recently had to put a kerosene heater, of all things, in the house to help us keep warm because, like I was telling you, and that's the reason you're hearing a little background noise again, is because I've got the extra heater running here in the bedroom / office because I've got it set up. Anyway, you'll see it eventually. Still getting I'm still getting used to having a decent laptop, so that's why we don't have video this time. But I'm hoping that on Monday's podcast, we're not going to have it ready in time Friday, but hopefully Monday's podcast we're going to be doing a little bit of video. Anyhow, kerosene. Yeah, I was talking about kerosene. Gasoline in where we go, which is in Cambridge, Maryland. I forget what it was running, but kerosene was $5.56 a gallon. Okay, and as I recall, kerosene doesn't require the amount of refining gasoline requires. I may be backward on that. But kerosene is ridiculously expensive, and we've had to run a kerosene heater when it got really bitterly cold here, when temperatures got down into the single digits with wind chills into the negative double digits for a couple of days, and we still have the heater sitting in the kitchen. It's just not turned on right now. It's around 60 degrees in the kitchen, which is tolerable. It's just not pleasant. It's much warmer here in the bedroom because we've got the bedroom closed, and I've got 2 heaters running, but this is an older house, and it's not terribly energy efficient, so it's been a struggle keeping everything warm. I am, however, proud to report that I'm not wearing 2 layers of shirts today. I only have on my one, so I guess that's progress. But then the temperature outside is also better. So anyway, to wrap up the Iran situation is they're going to keep poking the bear a little bit, and we're the bear, and we'll see what happens as a result. But as it stands right now, there will be talks, and I can tell you that I don't think Trump's going to yield a whole heck of a lot on that. Now, that's going to wrap us up for this war section, except to remind you folks to pray for the Iranian people. I still think there's a possibility of some movement there in terms of regime change, but it's going to take a little bit of doing, and it's going to take a little bit of time. In sports, oh look, the NFL Pro Bowl happened. And that covers some extent of my interest in the NFL Pro Bowl, except to make fun of it. It happened. Nobody cares. It's become such a low-rated affair that it got moved to a Tuesday. And didn't they just play flag football, basically, instead of tackle football? So they want people to tune in to watch their hard-hitting NFL stars playing flag football on a 50-yard field instead of real football on a 100-yard field. Okay. And they moved it to a Tuesday. How many NFL games ever took place on a Tuesday in the regular season? In the regular season, not too bloody many. You may have had a Monday night game that got postponed due to bad weather or something, but there have not been many. Occasionally they'll do a few of the preseason games are played on Tuesdays, but realistically, an NFL preseason game is just a glorified practice played against a bunch of guys wearing different colored clothing than yours. That's pretty much all it is. Now, oddly, in my experience of 17 total years covering high school sports, we had a lot of weather-related stuff would cause postponements of things. I can remember one basketball season. This would have been the winter of 2011 to 2012. We did not get a flake of snow the entire winter. And then come the very end of February, I want to say around the 26th of February, 2012, I had to go cover a private school girls basketball playoff in Salisbury, Maryland, and learned that public schools who had playoff games that night in Wicomico County, because that's where Salisbury is, it's the county seat of Wicomico, had postponed sporting events due to thunderstorms. Now, bear in mind that the only athletic activity that takes place outdoors in winter are a couple of events that are part of what is called indoor track. You can't do, I think it's shot-put discus they do indoors as part of indoor track. Whatever it was, that's it. And when you do indoor track, it takes place in daylight. What they were canceling was nighttime events due to thunderstorms. They canceled basketball games that took place inside well-lit, climate-controlled gymnasiums because of thunderstorms. Okay, schools around here in particular will close at the drop of a hat. I have seen Talbot County, Maryland close multiple times due to forecast snow that ends up not even hitting us. Okay, now Talbot County in particular is fast to pull the trigger here because in around 1995 or 1996, at an intersection just a few blocks from Easton High School, this is at the intersection of Route 50 and Dutchman's Lane as you're coming into Easton, a tractor-trailer truck ran a red light in the fog and hit a bus full of school children. I believe the driver of the school bus was killed and the kids were knocked around a little bit, and some of them had some injuries. I don't think anyone had any truly critical injuries, except for, of course, the driver who tragically died. Since then, because there was no school delay that morning due to the fog, since then, Talbot County has been incredibly reluctant to open schools on time when there's any hint of bad weather. And I can understand erring on the side of caution, especially in light of there being a fatal car crash. But I think you might want to wait a few more hours when there's a snow forecast, because weather in this area can be pretty mercurial. But that's neither here nor there. Back to the original concept of what the weather did. Over the course of my career as a sports writer covering high school games, and this is just high school, I watched football games at one point on every single day of the week. Friday night is the standard night for high school football games. I saw Friday games, I saw Saturday games. I saw Sunday games that got moved to Sunday, even though state public school rules, we covered almost entirely public school, with no private school on this side of the Eastern Shore, has a football team. On this side of the bay, in Maryland, has a football team. I've seen, they move games to Sunday, even though it was a violation of their policy, because if the governing body allows it, then it's allowed, right? Let's ask the king. King, can we play football on Sunday? And the king says, okay, you can play football on Sunday. So then they go ahead and play football on Sunday. So I've seen games on Monday. I've seen games on Tuesday. I've even seen games on Thursday. And, of course, Thursday's a lot more common than Sunday and Monday. And I've seen games on Wednesday. As we get to anecdotal evidence, that segment in this podcast, I will tell you about a Wednesday game that was of significant note for a different reason. But for the NFL to put a game on Tuesday, yeah, they're not expecting much. They're expecting it to get ratings worse than the Grammys. And by the way, the Grammys, which was a bunch of morons bloviating about their political affiliations, yet again, that's why we don't listen to music to hear what you think about stolen land, Billie Eilish, while you're living on a $14 million estate that's got a gate and locks and armed guards. Okay, on what used to be Tongva native tribe land. You simple bitch. Anyway, the ratings are going to suck because it's not worth watching. And they don't seem to understand that if people think something is not worth watching, all the insults and epithets and threats and screaming of racism in the world are not going to make people watch. You cannot coerce people into watching something that's unwatchable, I point you to Star Trek Starfleet Special Ed Academy, which is, again, slowly going down in ratings with every new absurdly bad episode, okay? You can't put window lickers in charge of Starfleet, but that's what the show's all about. Moving on to a much more fun sport to discuss, I think, baseball. I found this great statistic on Twitter from a guy who goes by Baseball History Nut. His his Twitter handle is at @nut_history. And here's a list of rare baseball stats and how often they have occurred in Major League history. So we're going to start with the least rare event of these statistical anomalies, and we're going to go all the way to the most rare event. And spoiler alert, the most rare event has only happened one time in the 150-plus year history of professional baseball in America. Okay, here we go. First, we're going to start with hitting for the cycle. When you hit for the cycle in baseball, you get a single, a double, a triple, and a home run, at least one of each, in a game. That has happened a total of 339 times. A no-hitter has happened 318 times. On average, of late, it seems to happen 3 or 4 times a year. Largely because batters nowadays friggin' swinging anything. And strikeout numbers are starting to get a little bit inflated. When you have somebody who hits 250 with 31 home runs and 225 strikeouts, quite honestly, that sumbitch don't belong on my team. I don't care if he hit 30 home runs. 225 strikeouts, that's 8 games worth of strikeouts. Okay, and change. You've cost me 8 losses with all the times you couldn't make contact with the ball, but you hit it out of the park 35 times. Now, in the way they compute runs created versus wins created, the benchmark for if you create 10 runs with what you do, it's equivalent to winning your team 1 ball game. So if you create, 35 runs with home runs, that's 3.5 wins. Okay, let's say that you drive in 80 runs, so that's 8 wins that in theory you have created with 35 home runs and 80 RBIs, but then you struck out 225 times, 27 outs per game. 27 times 8 is 216. So you've wasted 8 games and 3 innings of a 9th game waving at the ball, and that counteracts the 8 games that you won by hitting 35 home runs. So that's kind of a zero benefit, zero net benefit. But anyway, no-hitter 318 times. An inside the park grand slam. Inside the park grand slam is simply where the batter runs out a home run because the ball didn't leave the park and the bases were loaded at the time. That has happened 224 times. Hitting a home run in your first career at bat has taken place 133 times. So that happens about once a year. An immaculate inning. Now, an immaculate inning is when a pitcher strikes out all 3 batters he faces, and he strikes out each batter on just 3 pitches. It takes 9 pitches to pitch an immaculate inning, not 10, not 8. Okay, it's funny because you could get 3 ground balls to short on the first pitch of 3 at-bats and record 3 what are called 6-3 putouts and throw a 3-pitch inning, and that doesn't really get chronicled. But the immaculate inning, because you're actually striking people out, people love strikeouts. I love watching pitchers strike people out. It's while it's the hardest thing to do in sports to hit a baseball because you're hitting a sphere with a cylinder and the person throwing the sphere is actively trying to prevent you from making good contact, striking somebody out is fun to watch. Not as fun nowadays because, like I said, they're just waving at anything. But there was a time when your Steve Carltons and your Nolan Ryans were really fun to watch. Anyway, throwing an immaculate inning has taken place 110 times, which is a lot more than I thought. I would have figured it only had happened a few dozen times, but it's happened 110 times. Hitting a home run on the first pitch you ever saw in your career happened 31 times. Throwing a perfect game, which is you face 27 batters, get them all out, no walks, no hits, no errors, no hit batters, nobody reaches base under any circumstances, has happened 23 times. Now, there have been some odd games where you would have, like Babe Ruth, for example, took part in a game that was argued to have been a perfect game, but it really wasn't because he was pitching. So this would have been before he went to the Yankees for the 1920 season, I guess it would have been. He was pitching and walked the first batter, got ejected for arguing over the walk with the home plate umpire, and they had to relieve him with a different pitcher, obviously. And the relief pitcher then pitched a perfect game for like 11 or 12 innings, and the Red Sox won the game. That's not a perfect game because the leadoff guy got on base. Okay? There was a game in 1990 that I listened to on the radio. I was actually delivering for Domino's that night, and it was an ESPN game on the radio. And Jack Morris of the Detroit Tigers gave up a one-out base hit in the first inning against somebody. I want to say it was the Seattle Mariners. That's probably wrong. But anyway, he gave up a one-out base hit in the top of the first inning, got a double play on the next batter to end the inning, and then retired the next 24 batters he faced. So that wasn't a perfect game, but it was a one-hit shutout, and it was a heck of a performance by Jack Morris. But perfect games 23 times, a true perfect game. Now, I don't know if they count games that didn't go the full 9 innings due to weather, but in any event, 23 times a pitcher has thrown a game in which they've retired every batter they faced. Hitting a home run 4 times in a game has happened 18 times. I have personally not seen it, but I know that, I want to say outfielder Mark Whitten did it when he was with Toronto back in the early 90s. I think Bob Horner did it around 1982 when he was playing for the Braves. It has happened a few times, but I've never seen it happen live. 18 times, 4 home run game. Unassisted triple play. I think the last one of these was pulled like in the 90s by Mickey Morandini, who was a middle infielder with the Phillies. But I'm sure I'm wrong about that. That's just the only one, the most recent one I can remember. Unassisted triple play has been pulled 15 times. Perfect game lost on the 27th batter. So you've gotten through 8 innings of play, you got 2 outs in the 9th inning, and you got a perfect game going, and that 27th batter reaches base somehow. That has happened 14 times, and I can remember one instance in particular where an umpire got a call wrong on a safe out at first on what would have been the final out of a perfect game, and yeah, I could never forgive him for that if I'd been the pitcher. For someone to hit 2 grand slams in a game, it has happened 13 times. Okay. To have a game where you hit a sacrifice fly 3 times in the same game, that's only happened 11 times. Now, sacrifice fly is when you hit a fly ball into the outfield, it's caught for an out, and a runner, almost always from third base in this case, tags up and scores a run as a result. That's a sacrifice fly. So for someone to have 3 of those in a game, it's only happened 11 times. To get caught stealing 3 times in a single game has happened 6 times. And I'll bet you at least one of those, maybe twice, was Rickey Henderson. Because Rickey Henderson, now in 1982, when he stole 130 bases, he also got caught. It was either 42 or 48 times. So, yeah, he stole a lot of bases, but he also got caught a number of times. So getting caught 3 times, stealing in the same game 6 times. Having a 9-inning game in which you strike out 20 batters as a pitcher, it's happened 5 times. We know Roger Clemens has done it. We know Kerry Wood, I think, did it with the Cubs back in like 1998. It's happened 5 times in the history of Major League Baseball. For a player to hit a grand slam in their first Major League Baseball at bat, that has happened 4 times. Just 4 times. And I, off the top of my head, cannot think of anyone that has done it. But again, it's happened 4 times. For a player to get 3 hits in a single inning, that has happened 3 times. grounding into a double play 4 times in a game. Wow, that's crazy. 4 ground into double GIDPs in a game has happened twice. I've not seen that either. But I can tell you that there are players that are notorious, like Jim Rice of the Red Sox toward the end of his career hit into a ton of double plays because they kept the ball down so he'd hit it on the ground because he was a bit of a slugger, and they kept the ball down so he'd hit it on the ground, and he wasn't very fast because at that point his legs were giving out on him. So he hit into a fair number of double plays. I remember in 1989 with the Orioles, their leadoff hitter for most of the year was a left fielder named Phil Bradley, who had come over from Seattle. And I used to refer to Phil Bradley as the rally killer because he would come up with runners on base and 1 out and hit into a damn double play almost every time, it felt like. But for someone to do it 4 times in a game, it's only happened twice in the entire history of Major League Baseball. So... And now the most rare occurrence in the history of baseball for a player to hit 2 grand slams in 1 inning. It has happened a grand total of 1 time. And it happened in 1999. Fernando Tatis did it. 2 grand slams in an inning. So there you go. Your baseball tidbit for the day. The most rare occurrence that's actually happened. 2 grand slams in an inning has only happened once. All the way back up to hitting for the cycle has happened 339 times. So, and again, that's more often than I thought it would have happened. But moving into politics and news of that nature, we've got an update on the trans death cult. Here's part of what's happening, and this leads me to a second piece. This took place Monday, I think. Headline from Washington Examiner by Jack Burrell. Detransitioner's $2 million judgment, a breakthrough for gender transition lawsuits. What happened here was a woman named Fox Varian had what they call top surgery in the gender reassignment thing, and basically had most of her breast tissue removed in an attempt to try to transition from female to male. Now, we know you can't change your biology, and you can pretend to be a woman all you want, but at 40, you still better go get yourself a prostate exam, okay? And you can pretend to be a man all you want, but you still need to be checked for cervical cancer, all right? But in any event, what happened was, well, let me read you the story here. A New York jury handed a $2 million judgment to a woman who accused a psychologist and surgeon of rushing her into gender transition surgery as a minor, finding the pair liable for malpractice in a landmark case that could pave the way for future litigation. It's not a matter of could. It has. And then I've got a related story that's going to do this, further that even more. The jury in Westchester County awarded Fox Varian, age 22, $1.6 million for past and future suffering related to the breast removal surgery she had when she was 16, and $400,000 for future medical expenses. Varian, who underwent a gender transition surgery as a minor, as 16, you're a minor, of course, is part of a growing group of detransitioners who have filed lawsuits against their doctors for pushing them into transgender surgeries. What you're seeing with the trans death cult now is that, for one thing, I don't understand why these friggin' perverts can't leave kids the hell alone and just let them be kids. Instead, they're trying to fill them with all this ideological nonsense, pulling them out of schools to protest ICE when they're 12 years old. Okay, and convincing them, no, you're actually a boy born in a girl's body and you should get surgically mutilated. Because that's essentially what this is, a surgical mutilation of children. Okay, and it's an abomination. It's medical pedophilia is basically what it is. Anyway, Dr. Kurt Maselli, medical director for the advocacy group Do No Harm, told the Washington Examiner that the verdict was a, quote, breakthrough for transitioners such as Varian and the pain they go through in undergoing gender transition surgery that they later regret. See, that's the thing about a lot of this stuff is they go ahead and they get parts hacked off of them and then they realized that they were just a kid who didn't really know what they wanted in life, and they changed their mind, and they look down, and they've been butchered. And they're stuck that way. And sometimes it can be incredibly physically painful. Okay? This is the first time that, quote, this is the first time a jury has really validated and acknowledged the pains and challenges that a detransitioner has gone through, and really said that gender transition procedures do constitute harm, significant harm, especially to the individual here who was impacted as a minor, Maselli said. And really, clinicians failed. They failed terribly in terms of caring for Fox. Another prominent detransitioner, I've actually heard this name before. I had not heard of Fox Varian before this story. Chloe Cole celebrated the ruling in favor of Varian as a, quote, huge leap for the detransitioner movement, unquote. Cole's pursuing her own lawsuit seeking to find doctors liable for malpractice regarding her transition surgeries. Every doctor and clinic involved in this fad, she claims, should be afraid, very afraid for what comes next. They knew what they were doing when they performed mastectomies on perfectly healthy teenagers. $2 million is nothing compared to the personal cost of childhood mutilation. But this verdict gives real hope to the next generation of transitioners seeking justice, Cole said in a statement. During the trial, Varian said that her surgery left her with nerve pain, adding that she immediately had thought that this was wrong and it couldn't be true, according to the Epoch Times. Shame, she said during trial. I felt shame. It's hard to face that you are disfigured for life. Maselli said the harms done to those who undergo sex change treatments are significant and that the medical system should support detransitioners as they navigate those challenges. Quote, I think when we listen to the stories of detransitioners, people who've gone through these horrible medications and procedures, we hear the more than just the physical trauma that it's caused, but also the emotional scarring and the lifelong consequences they live with, whether that is dealing with the wounds that may result or just their appearance, Maselli said to the Examiner. The Supreme Court handed advocates against transgender surgeries for minors of major victory in June 2025 as well, when it ruled that Tennessee's law barring the procedure for minors was constitutional. The 6-3 ruling had wider ramifications beyond Tennessee, including similar laws in more than 20 states. So more than 20 states are getting the message. Maybe states like the People's Republic of Maryland, where I live, and California out on the West Coast will eventually get that clue as well. But here's the other related story that I wanted to bring up, also from the Examiner. Now, this is actually back in September, on September 3rd by Kaylin Deese. And forgive me for not bringing this up yet, but... forgive me for not bringing this up yet, but I was not doing a podcast. So this story that the DOJ last September backs a bill extending statute of limitations for detransitioner lawsuits by 25 years is relevant now as well. The Justice Department said has endorsed legislation. Now, again, this is back from September, but like I said, I didn't have a podcast back then. Has endorsed legislation that would dramatically expand the window for filing lawsuits related to transgender procedures performed on minors, marking the Trump administration's most aggressive step yet to curb what it calls the chemical and surgical mutilation of children. Now, this is not law, okay? The Department of Justice does not make law. The Department of Justice is part of the Executive Department, which executes laws. What they did was they handed down recommendations to Congress. And in a legislative proposal transmitted to Congress, the DOJ said it supports the Victims of Chemical or Surgical Mutilation Act, or VCSMA. The act would ban medical professionals from performing gender transition procedures on children and create a private right of action for victims who later decide to detransition, a term commonly used to describe the process by which people who went through medical efforts to transition genders decide to live as their biological sex after finding that they endured permanent physical harm. You know, here's the thing about all of this, is I don't understand how these doctors feel like they're morally and legally capable of doing this anyway. A 16-year-old cannot go buy a car, okay? A 16-year-old cannot vote. A 16-year-old, in many circumstances, cannot get married. A 16-year-old cannot buy alcohol. Okay, but a 16-year-old can get a laparoscopy surgery or a slapadicotomy surgery. I just don't understand how someone who can't legally consent to a binding contract, such as buying an automobile, even a used one, can legally have their bodies altered like this. And that a doctor's like, okay, cool. Well, the thing about it is that a major organization of plastic surgeons, and let me find this. Hold on, I'll get to that thing hopefully I'll get to that thing I've got saved here about Yogi Berra directly. Gender. Okay, hold on. I don't know what's going on with autocorrect on my phone, but it must think I'm typing in an entirely different frickin' language. I just don't even understand it. So anyway, now another thing I'd like to point out is if someone said on, say, Twix, just 5 years ago, that this so-called gender-affirming care, this transitional surgery, this reassignment surgery, if they referred to it as child mutilation, they would have gotten banned on Twitter. There are numerous people speaking up on Twitter now saying that they got banned for it, including Chaya Rachik, who is, I probably got her last name wrong, who runs the Libs of TikTok account. She said she got banned on Twitter for saying it. And now, oh look, here's a position statement from the American Society of Plastic Surgeons on gender surgery for children and adolescents. How about that? They issued a position statement just yesterday wherein they're saying that they no longer recommend gender transition surgery for anyone under the age of 19. How about that? Because as we all know, that, no plastic surgeon's in it for the money, right? Right. Okay, if you believe that, man, if I got some oceanfront stuff in Oklahoma, I can sell you. Oh, boy. So this is a huge win for the forces of morality against mutilating children. And it does my heart good to see that. I'll just say it that way. It does my heart good to see that. Now, here's some other news. This is, I don't know what to make of this. So I need to get some responses from you folks about what all this implies. Okay. Reports have come out in the last few days that the Dalai Lama, who is the official, I guess, leader of the Buddhist monks in Tibet, okay, was named 169 times in documents that just got revealed that were connected to the investigations surrounding thankfully dead pedophile and sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. And that the Dalai Lama actually met Jeffrey Epstein in 2012 and was supposed to attend, according to reports, some sort of an event with the man. Now, let me find that bookmark because, again, I'm using too many apps to get my information. Hold on, I just had it right here. Tell you what, I've just got another link right here, so we'll just go ahead and read it from, let's see. We'll just go with the Financial Express. FinancialExpress.com reporting this. According to reports, some of the emails dated from October 2012, including references suggesting that the Tibetan spiritual leader met Epstein and was also expected to attend a function with him. This is written by Disha Jana. Newly released emails linked to Jeffrey Epstein's case have sparked controversy after references to the Dalai Lama reportedly appeared at least 169 times in the correspondence. The mentions have drawn attention amid the broader scrutiny surrounding individuals named in the latest tranche of Epstein-related documents. I think 3 million documents of various types, lengths, and compositions were just recently released. According to reports, some of the emails dated from October 2012 include references suggesting that the Dalai Lama met Epstein and was also expected to attend a function with him. European media outlet Nexta TV further claimed that individuals described as followers of the Dalai Lama may have also met Epstein. Last year, a journalist named Michael Wolff made a notable claim in the Daily Beast, and this video with him making this claim is on the Daily Beast's YouTube account. So if you look up Michael Wolff Daily Beast, Wolf with 2 F's, on YouTube, you can find the video. I'm not going to play it here right now. But anyway, he made a notable claim in that podcast recounting various high-profile figures at Epstein's Manhattan townhouse during salons or gatherings there. When listing names, he included the Dalai Lama. Wolff suggested that the reason for the Dalai Lama's presence was likely financial, as many people visited Epstein to try to obtain money or donations from him for philanthropic purposes. And I know from other reports, and when I say other reports, when I see a report of something like that, I check it. Because if it isn't confirmed by 2 or 3 or hopefully more sources, I am not really keen to talk about it as if it's fact. Okay? But I've seen multiple reports that the Dalai Lama charges money to be around him. If you want to have a visit with the Dalai Lama, it's $10,000 or $20,000 or more dollars to just hang out with him for half an hour while there's other people around. And to a degree, I can understand it, but yeah, Dalai Lama is all about the Benjamins. Okay, according to Jacob Silverman in his Substack piece, he noted that the Dalai Lama that the office did not respond to questions about any potential donations or Epstein links. According to Silverman, the Dalai Lama had received from other controversial figures in the past. In 2009, he spoke at an event for NXIVM, NXIVM, the cult, whose leader, Keith Raniere, was convicted in 2019 on 7 criminal charges and sentenced to 120 years, not months, years in prison. During the 2009 appearance, Dalai Lama reportedly gave a speech and placed a ceremonial Tibetan scarf on Raniere's shoulders. For his efforts, the Dalai Lama received $1 million. LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman, this is another reason I don't use LinkedIn anymore, award-winning filmmaker Mira Nair, and didn't see this name before, Indian American wellness guru Deepak Chopra were some of the other people named in the newly released documents. Now, the disclaimer at the end of this is, the mere mention or naming of an individual in emails, documents, or records does not imply wrongdoing, involvement, or malicious intent. The references cited are part of documents released by official U.S. government sources and do not constitute evidence of illegal or unethical conduct. Okay, let me make that clear. But where there's smoke, and we'll just move it from there on. If the Dalai Lama sues me for defamation, then we're just going to start asking some pointed questions. And it would be interesting to see what discovery would entail if he does attempt to sue anybody. The sad facts. Now today, for some reason, I've been watching a lot of videos, and I guess I somehow triggered the algorithm on YouTube for this, watching a lot of videos about the modern dating scene. And I guess I've been propagandized, or maybe I'm seeing things the right way, depending on what you think. But I tell you what, we got a gold-digging hoe epidemic in this country, folks. And there are a lot of women that have basically turned dating into a transactional affair. I watched a video from one of those stupid court shows, which I hated Judge Wapner when People's Court came out. I know you've been sworn and I've read your complaint. That's how he started every single show. John claims that Bill's pet turtle ran him down in a parking lot and caused significant injuries. John says that Bill's pet turtle means that Bill should pay him money. Bill says that John's a slow idiot and should have gotten out of the way because, after all, it's a turtle. John is demanding $1,500. I know you've been sworn and I've read your complaint. That's pretty much how that starts. Anyway, I watched this stupid court show where a woman took a man to court for not paying for her dinner and skipping out in the middle of the meal when they were on a date. Well, it turns out the date was for drinks. She's what she refers to as a social media influencer, which means she doesn't have a job. And she had turned him down for dates beforehand. And on the third try, this stupid idiot met her somewhere for drinks. Well, she gets in and she's 45 minutes late, barely says anything to apologize about that, and then orders a top shelf margarita, which is probably 25 or 30 bucks. And then she orders a calamari appetizer. Calamari can be a little expensive depending on where you go, so that could be another 25 or 30 or more dollars. And then she gets, as the waiter comes back a second time, another top shelf margarita and some fried alligator bites. So now we're pushing $100 for a date that was only supposed to be drinks. The man had bought one drink, and then the waiter comes back around and she orders an entree of salmon. At that point, he excused himself to use the bathroom and left the restaurant. The next day, she texted him, "You a clown for skipping out on our date." Of course, having worked in the newspaper business and priding myself by and large on getting my grammar and spelling right, I can't stand the way people text nowadays. And my son Spencer, if you're listening to this, for when you send me text messages, son, start capitalizing stuff. Okay? I love you, man. You're my buddy. You're my hero. But start capitalizing things when you write. Daggone it, that's infuriating to somebody like me. Anyway, so now I'm yelling at my kid in my podcast. Congratulations, Dave. Congratulations. Sorry, son. Anyway, the judge awarded the woman nothing, threw her complaint out, and literally used the word prostitute when describing her, and said that what she did was a low-integrity move and that she should really re-examine her life. And I'm all in favor of it. So anyway, the gold digging hose thing, that feeds into that. And here's a little anecdote. Locks versus keys. There's supposedly a double standard in society where if a woman has had sex with a lot of men, she's considered a slut. But if a man has had sex with a lot of women, he's commended for it and considered a stud and a real ladies' man and a Lothario or whatever. Here's the thing. Here's how somebody put it to me. If you have a key that can open many, many locks, you have what is known as a master key. If you have a lock that any key will open, you have what is known in the industry as a really shitty lock. Okay? Any woman can, well, almost any. There's a few that are almost as ugly as me. Essentially, in order for a woman to get laid, all she has to do is show up. I've told my wife this repeatedly, and she doesn't believe it, but whenever she shows up to get lucky, she gets lucky. So, hey, there you go. And luck has nothing to do with it because she's my wife and I love her. But anyway, in order for a guy to get sex, he has to finagle something. He has to make certain things happen. Okay? A woman can just show up, essentially raise her skirt, say, have at it, and the guy will be ready to go, and that's that. Women aren't necessarily like that, and men can't just walk out and produce their genitals and say, hey, anybody want this, and have something happen. Okay? Sorry this is so vulgar. But what I'm saying is that for a man to get a woman to go to bed with him takes considerably more effort than for a woman to get a man to go to bed with her. And if you have a key that opens many locks, again, you have a master key. And if you have a lock that any key can open, you have a really crappy lock. Okay? And we're just gonna leave it at that. That's the sad facts for today. In the Dragons world, role-playing and nerd news, I'm still playing the Magic the Gathering Arena app heavily, and the new set that got released we may be discussing the lawsuit that some players have filed against Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, Richard Garfield, and, I forget the lady's name, alleging that Wizards has done some real manipulation to try to make more money and raise their stock costs with Magic, but maybe we'll get into that another day. Today we're just going to talk about the new set of cards that came out called Lorwyn Eclipsed. Having played it longer since the release of this new set, the new sets seem to come out about every 2 months. The new Lorwyn set sucks. It still sucks. I'm not seeing great combos of cards that make these decks really hard to beat. I'm not seeing great individual cards that are total game changers. There's a couple that can do some pretty cool things, but by and large, this is one of the weaker sets I've ever played with. And again, I started back with Revised in, 1995? Okay, now I haven't played straight through every set since then. There's about a 25-year lapse at one point. But of the stuff that I've played with, the really old stuff and the really new stuff, I'm just not seeing it out of Lorwyn. So I would strongly advise against spending any money on that. I don't spend any money on the game. I play it for free, and if you do certain things, like if you play certain cards or cast certain spells or use certain colors during the games, you can receive fake coins and you receive fake coins, and you can use the fake coins to buy virtual cards on the app, and that's how I play. That's entirely how I play. And I've stopped buying Lorwyn cards, and I'm just saving the fake coins so that I can buy fake coins from the next fake set that comes out in another couple of months. I've got some sad news to report from China. This is really eerie. And then we're going to get to anecdotal evidence, talk about Wednesday football, and then final thoughts, and we're done. 135 people have been found murdered and partially eaten in a tourist's hotel room in Beijing. Okay, the report stated that the alleged culprit, an American tourist, had, over the course of just 1 week, murdered 135 Chinese citizens and eaten all or part of each of them. They've identified 135 partial sets of remains and forms of identification. So the ones that they didn't find any parts of, they found their IDs and stuff like that. And the preliminary report is that the tourist, who had been there for a few days before that on a visa, did it because, and I quote, "It'll take you maybe 15 minutes to eat, and you know what they say, whenever you eat Chinese, you're always hungry an hour later." Moving on to anecdotal evidence. Yes, that was a joke, folks. Get over it. Moving on to anecdotal evidence, we're going to go back to that Wednesday football discussion, and we're going to head to the town, the small, cute little town, actually, of Oak Hall, Virginia, on Virginia's eastern shore of the Chesapeake. It forms the tip of the Delmarva Peninsula, and the date is Wednesday evening, October 7th, 2015. A little background for you. In Oak Hall, Virginia, is a small high school called Arcadia High. Their mascot is the Firebird. Or as they say it down there, because they've got a pretty thick Virginia accent, the Farbird. But I like the Arcadia folks because they've always been incredibly nice to me. Anyway, the Firebird football team had to postpone its game from the previous Friday against visitor Colonel Richardson High School from Federalsburg, Maryland. Now, I was the Caroline County beat writer for the newspaper group that I worked for, so I covered a lot of Colonel Richardson and North Carolina games, especially on Fridays in the fall. I covered one or the other, or both if they played on different days each weekend when they played football. So this time I went down to Arcadia, but I had to wait 5 days to Wednesday because of the arrival of Hurricane Joaquin. Okay, at its peak, Joaquin was packing sustained winds of 155 miles per hour, making it, I believe that's a Category 5 storm at its height. and the mercury had dropped to just 27.49 on the barometer. To give you some proper context, without even looking at the barometric pressure right now, I can tell you that it's probably around 29.9. So it's a huge drop for the barometric pressure to get that low. As my grandfather used to say, if you ever see the barometer at 26, you're probably looking at it underwater, because there's a storm that bad that has come through. Anyway, I'm at this game. It's the second quarter. Colonel would eventually lose the game to the Firebirds. I think the final was 28-22. That's the number that sticks in my head. Well, in the second quarter, with a little over 7 minutes left to go, now Arcadia, Virginia is close to Chincoteague, Virginia, which is, of course, world famous for its wild ponies and all the hullabaloo that surrounds their activities on the island. Near Chincoteague is a place called Wallops Island, and NASA has a facility there. And it just so happened that on the night of October 7th, 2015, during the second quarter of the Colonel's Firebirds football game, Wallops Island had a rocket launch. And as the game's going on, I noticed that some of the people in the stands had turned around and were facing away from the game. And then more and more of them did, until everyone was facing away from the game. And then the players stopped and started looking up into the sky. And the referees stopped and started looking into the sky. And I started looking into the sky. And the people inside the enclosed press box came out of the press box and started looking into the sky towards the east and slightly south, because the rocket was taking off into outer space. The clock kept ticking at the stadium, and for about 60 seconds, nothing happened, as everyone at the football game stopped to watch the rocket launch. A few people even applauded, and it was the most surreal thing I ever saw at a football game. But that happened a little over 10 years ago, on October 7th, 2015, where I saw the only Wednesday football game I ever watched. And it was marked by the launch of a NASA rocket from nearby Wallops Island. So there's your anecdotal evidence. So when I say I've seen it all, I've seen some stuff, okay? Some of it's been pretty cool like that. Some of it not so good. But final thought, and we're going to go back to Twix for this bookmark tweet that things that make you go, oh boy. What we had was in 1999, during the creation of the cartoon movie Toy Story 2. Okay, Emir Khan, real Emir Khan, reports that in 1999, during the filming of Toy Story 2, Pixar accidentally erased about 90% of the movie with a single command. Studio backups failed, and the only way the film survived was because an employee who was on maternity leave had a copy saved at home. Okay, so they got hold of this lady, and she gave them a copy of the film, and it saved them a fortune. And Toy Story 2 was a pretty popular film. As I recall, it made a very good amount of money. Years later, that woman was fired during a layoff that Pixar had to cut costs. The moral of the story there is, your job does not truly care about you. You are there for a purpose. And when they feel that you no longer serve that purpose, they will drop you like a hot rock. Been there, done that. Okay? So while you're working, you'd better have something outside of work to look forward to. So you better find something, a hobby, friends, raise a family, whatever it might be. You better have something to fall back on mentally and emotionally, because your job will not be there for you. The overwhelming majority of people will not own their own business in their lifetime. So they're going to work for somebody else, okay? Most of the people listening to this, you're going to sign a paycheck on the back. Not many of the people listening to this will ever sign a paycheck on the front. So remember that your job does not give a crap about you. You can give a crap about your job, and that's perfectly fine. You want to be a dedicated and productive and good and caring employee. But remember, in the final analysis, you're just a warm body. And you need to remember that there are things beyond your job. And that's our final thought for the day. I want to thank you for listening. Please follow my podcast. Give me a 5-star rating. I do appreciate it. It'll help the algorithm notice me a little bit more. Leave a comment, answer my poll, interact. I respond to all the reasonable comments, as I always say, but the unreasonable people and trolls can get a life. You can listen to this podcast on Spotify, Amazon, Audible, iHeartRadio, and others. My email for story and discussion topic suggestions is wspdpod@gmail.com. Drop me a line. Donate to help me get better technology. My Cash App is WSPDPod. My Venmo is the WSPDPod2. I finally got some bugs worked out there on Venmo, which is great. So please donate and help us get some better tech. Thanks to our listener, John in Colorado. My cousin, actually, credit where it's due. He has provided me with a laptop, and once I figure out how to use a real laptop, after being stuck with a crappy Chromebook for 5 years, I'm going to be doing some really bigger and better things here. My Twitter handle is at the WSPD Podcast. Follow me there. My YouTube channel is at the WSPD Podcast. On Patreon.com, we're /WSP Dragons. And again, first chapter of the novel manuscript that I just completed called Love's Crucible is going to be going up there on Monday for free, but everything else I think we're going to go ahead and paywall it. Other socials, of course, will be coming soon as we expand. We're getting a little bit bigger, a little bit better every day. So please jump on, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We love your support and we appreciate your listening. Thanks again for doing that. Subscribe, spread the word, and help me entertain and annoy more people. This is David, the Nerd Emperor, signing off. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you on Friday.